Good morning. Hey, Joel Boer here with Be Growth Driven. We are excited about today's episode. We have Mr. Biz himself, Ken Wentworth. We're excited to have him here and tell us about how he helps business owners run their companies more profitably and more efficiently. So for a lot of you out there that maybe are starting a business, maybe you already own a business, maybe you're going through some difficulties. Let's face it, a lot of businesses have this last year. This is probably the episode for you. You might want to stay tuned. So if you're just tuning in on Instagram as well as on Clubhouse, if you want to join the live conversation and ask Mr. Biz any questions, there's the place to do it. Text the word join to 402-347-9770, 402-347-9770. And we'll put it, I'll have Jesse or whatever on Instagram also add it to the comments there too. Hey, Justin, thank you for jumping on. Without further ado, let's bring Mr. Biz himself onto the stage. Ken, how are you doing this morning? I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, Joel. Been looking forward to this conversation for a while since we scheduled it.
You bet. So tell us, let's get started though. First of all, real quickly and kind of jumping into it, tell people who you are. Where'd you start? Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I worked for 20 plus years at a Fortune 15 company, and was fortunate enough to get to the top 3%. And actually, ironically enough, when I was told I was going to be promoted in the top 1%, is when I decided I was going to leave the corporate world behind me and jump into the entrepreneur space. I'd always wanted to do that, and I had sort of not fallen victim, I shouldn't say it in such a negative way, but I'd gotten a little frustrated with some of the typical big company red tape, bureaucracy type things that were starting to weigh me down a little bit. And I'd always wanted to do my own thing and start my own business. And I just had never taken the leap. And I just decided, literally as the story goes, from the 48th floor elevator ride down to the first floor in 270 Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan, decided during that elevator ride that I was going to resign and leave, and didn't even know what I was going to do next. And I didn't even know what I do now as a fractional CFO was a thing. I was so involved in the, corporate world that I didn't even know that this was a thing. So, the next time I was back in New York, I let my boss know that I was going to resign and I would stick around because I didn't even know what I was going to do next. And then, had a conversation with a mentor about, what I want to be when I grow up type thing. And, he said, you need to be a CFO for, 6 or 8 businesses. And I said, well, how the heck do you do that? Being CFO for one business is a 60, 70 hour a week job. And he explained it to me, no, you work with them fractionally, part-time basis. Maybe they don't need a full-time CFO, but they need someone who has that expertise. And made a lot of sense to me. Went out and got my first client. And I mean, it was just like the epiphany, the aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. As the cliche goes, it's like I don't work because I love what I do so much.
Right. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, so, there's a couple aspects to what you just shared right there. I think a lot of people might be in that phase where they're like, I'm doing this job and I just don't know if this is, for one company. I mean, let's be real. For one company, you're stuck in the culture and politics, you could say, or the culture of that one company. And for some people, that's great. That's where they need to be. But, that's what I think is beautiful. You said about your elevator ride down is that's how long it took to make a real decision.
And to be fair, I had been thinking about starting my own business for a while. And then I did my master's degree, and I literally given myself 2 years. I had to stay 2 years. Company paid for it. So I'm like, okay, I got to stay 2 years and not have to pay it back. And so, I said, I got 2 years to figure out what I'm going to do. And during that 2 years, at the end of that 2 years was 2008. That's, of course, when the economic downturn happened. Then I got to do a lot of really cool stuff during those next several years. So that kind of re-energized me and kept me in the corporate world for a bit longer. But So it was a quick decision, relatively speaking. It was when I finally made that decision, but I'd always been thinking about it for quite a long time, actually.
Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, but But was it that final kind of that moment where you're like, well, I mean, I guess was there something about the moment that finally said this is the time?
Yeah, so it was the second time in about a 3 or 4 month period that I had come up with a revenue generating idea that was going to get shelved because of politics, bureaucracy type stuff. And I was frustrated, and I thought, man, I know I can be making a bigger impact. I know I can be helping more people, and I know it's not going to happen here, at
Right.
least not as consistently as I want it to. And so that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. I said, there's a way I can be helping people more. So I just have to figure out what it is. And that was it.
So really look for a way. I mean, I think a lot of people, they'll run into that same frustration where they do have the ideas, and you have a number of different possible barriers inside of an organization. And so that kind of limits where things go. But obviously making that hard decision is the first starting point. So how long ago was that you started that? How many years
That
ago?
was back in 2015.
2015. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any regrets?
Oh, absolutely not. And I should say, I'm not real. I mean, my career was fantastic. I mean, they treated me super well all the way up to the very end. And the experience that I gained while there allows me to do what I do now. So it was all part of the process. I didn't know that at the time, of course, Joel,
Right.
but it was all part of the process. But I have nothing bad to say whatsoever. It had run its course, and it was time for me to do something different.
Makes sense. So, I think, really for some people to like to turn to the next chapter, what you're saying there too is it wasn't the bad things about the company. You're taking the things that you learned. You could sit there and have focused on, they just, the board meetings were endless. This was endless. They didn't have enough water coolers around the office. I mean, I tell you what, filtered water everywhere, should be the way. But you're not focusing on that. And I think from a business perspective, sometimes we, and even professionals, like if they're trying to move up or whatever, they get lost in those weeds sometimes. And you're not doing that. So I think from that, because I want to get into your business though too, but I think just from that stage of growth, you're looking at things like, what did I learn from this? How can I incorporate this? And and that I think is a good positive thing, because there's people out there that are working for somebody. They're like, I really want to do my own thing. And I think it's important to highlight the mental attitude that's required to honestly do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I talk to people all the time about that. Carve that path out, make that plan, carve out the path, and then put a timeline to it and make it happen. Again, I had been thinking about it for 10 plus years, probably 10 plus years, and just never had pulled the trigger. And again, the scary part was, as I mentioned, I didn't even know what the heck I was going to do. I just knew that there was something. That proverbial, as they say, as an entrepreneur, you jump off the cliff and figure out how to build a plane on the way down. I mean, essentially, that's what I did.
Right. So I know let's say you're a small business. From a small business standpoint, when does a small business need someone like you?
I mean, honestly, and I'm a bit biased, of course, Joel, but honestly, from the start, because it's really important to have that solid financial foundation. Because here's the thing: as you're a small business, and when I say small, let's say you're doing less than $500,000 in revenue a year, those errors that you may have, you don't even realize them because they're small, right? That your pricing is off by 10%, and then when you're doing $500,000, it's not that big of a deal. But when you 10x that, and all of a sudden you're doing 5 million, now you've 10x the problem, and now it's like, holy crap, what happened? Everything was going pretty well. We bring in more revenue, a lot more revenue. Now all of a sudden we're losing money. What the heck's going on here? And so laying that foundation is super, super important, because as I said, as you scale, you just exacerbate whatever those little problems were when you were small as you get bigger. So super important to have that.
What are the most common problems that you see, like where a small company gets themselves locked into this?
The biggest one I see, Joel, is I call it the silent business killer. And that is they have and almost every business that I've ever worked with has this. So those of you out here, when I tell you what it is and you go, oh, I don't have that, you probably do. I hate to tell you. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. And the silent business killer is a product or service that you have that actually is at best is break even, but more likely you're actually losing money on it. And I call it the silent business killer because you don't even realize it, right? That's why. And so in that instance, and here's the bad part about it. Oftentimes that silent business killer, that product or service that's unprofitable, it is also your highest volume product or service because, of course, it's underpriced. So you're selling it like hotcakes. And so if you ever find yourself in a situation where your revenue is going up, sales are going up, but your bottom line is shrinking, the silent business killer is lurking in the background. He's the Grim Reaper, right? He's back there. And so that's the biggest thing I see. And as I mentioned, almost every business I've ever worked with has at least one of those. And it could also be, I should mention, in the form of, I had a client that I started working with that their pricing model, when they would price large commercial jobs, it wasn't accurately picking everything up. And so when I started working with him, he was doing about $1 million a year at the time. He had bid on a project for a $220,000 job, which of course, holy crap, big job. When you're doing $1 million and you get a job that's $200K plus, right? Well, that job ended up costing him $260,000.
Oh man.
So I had to tell him, and this is, he had bid that job and started it. And I started with him after. We get to the end of the year and I'm trying to, peel the onion back and figure out what the heck happened. And, it was on the surface, it doesn't make sense at all, right? I told him you could have less revenue and make more money. And most people can't wrap their heads around that. They go, wait a minute, that makes no sense whatsoever. I said, you could have had 220,000 less in sales or revenue, but you would have made $40,000 more. $40,000 more would have ended up in your pocket at the end of the day. And, wrapping your head around that isn't always easy sometimes, but that's another thing that's, super, super important. Bidding on those large jobs aggressively never ends up well in the long run.
Right. So I've seen that too, like with some companies, in where I consult companies on the marketing and growth, growing the business side, like getting their attention out there and attacking their audiences. Sometimes they're after harpooning the whales. And that's it. It's not that getting those whales is bad. It's when it becomes their primary focus and they lose the direction of where they honestly need to grow volume. Yeah.
And the other part is, when you're going after those whales, it's fine, but you got to make sure that you're pricing it at the margins that you should have. And in this case, making sure it's actually profitable, of course, but so, the example I can give you is, and that was exactly what happened with that particular client is it was a large local company and his whole thinking was, I'm going to bid super aggressive because I want to make sure I get this contract because I'll get a lot more work out of this. Well, the problem with that thinking, on the surface, it sounds great. But what happens is you go to bid the second project and that large company comes back to you and says, hey, Mr. Businessman, what do you bid on this? Well, you bid your regular pricing, and they go, too much. Thanks anyway. They expect the same aggressive pricing. And now you've lost that foot in the door at a cost from that first job as well. So, you got to make sure. Sometimes, here's the thing. Sometimes you have to turn those jobs down. We when he bids on jobs now, it's like this just happened, Joel, about a month ago. He said, I ran the numbers through a pricing model, and this particular job says I should price it. It was like $180,000. And he said, what should I price it at? I said, $180,000. He said, well, if I bid it at that, I'll never get the job. And I said, and that's okay. We don't want it at less than that. Yeah. It's going to be a headache. We're not going to make the margins we should make. We could be focused on, our resources could be focused on other, profitable things. So it's okay. And again, it's when you're chasing that top line, the sales, that revenue, it's difficult to wrap your mind around, wait, I should turn down big jobs. I'm not saying you turn them down, but I'm saying you bid them at appropriate profitability levels.
Right. I think that's where, people get focused on the wrong thing. They make the exciting, and it's easy to do, I think, for business owners. They get focused on the shiny, right? Is that usually what you see is happening? They just get, oh my goodness, that's so exciting. That's so shiny. And I want to do it. That if I do this, it makes me, part of one of those big companies, right?
Yeah, they get enamored with the top line. They get enamored with sales and revenue, which obviously super important. But you can't do that at the cost of literally of your profitability. Right.
One of the things that a company that I worked for many years ago before I started my own company, one of the things that I really appreciate that I took away from there was, you always focus on the margin. When you talk about numbers internally, you always focus on the margin, not the sales. The sales could mean nothing. Yeah, they're what you brag about, yes, at the end of the year, but the margin is where you're actually paying the bills and growing. And it's some people are, I've seen it with sales reps over the years. I got a $10,000 deal, I got a $20,000 deal. Yeah, but what's the profit? Oh, like, it's tight. It's tight. Oh, well, it's tight. Well, it's like $3,000. Okay, but that $3,000, we got to have this much time spent on it. It doesn't make sense for our organization to work on it.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. Again, people get so focused on the sales and forget the profitability sometimes, and that's how you end up with the silent business killer.
Right. So, what would be so? That silent business killer, it starts small for a lot of businesses. It's obviously going to get exacerbated by revenue. Okay. So what would be the most successful thing you see a lot of small businesses do accidentally?
Most successful thing they do accidentally. That's an interesting question.
Or one thing that you're looking for them that, to always do. It's very seldom you find them not doing this, maybe. I mean, something that, businesses, I guess the question I'm asking there is something where small businesses right now, let's say we look back at this last year and a half of craziness. And, some of these small businesses, I've seen some where they paralyze, they do nothing. You have the do nothing businesses, they freeze in time. You have some businesses who are they're in let's get out there and hit the pavement mode. And we had one of the individuals that we've had on Be Growth Driven, one of my good friends is Russ Yeager. I love what he said. He goes, when the pandemic hit, I started advertising more and more. So I guess let's shift to that question maybe too. As from a business standpoint, what do you see businesses do that's maybe another business killer?
One of the things that they don't do that they should is they don't have budget.
Okay.
Looks like the nasty B word, right? Even
right.
Mrs. Biz doesn't like the B word either, budget. And
right.
But I'll tell you this much, Joel. And again, I can't. I was trying to think of this. I did an interview last week, and I was trying to think of. I can't think of one company that I've worked with where we implemented a budget, and the first year we had a budget, they didn't have a record-breaking year. I have two clients. Get this. This is I'll show you how powerful and impactful a budget is. I have two clients I started working with last year in January of 2020. Of course, 2 months later, right, we're in shutdown, pandemic, et cetera. We implemented a budget, and during the pandemic, despite the shutdown, both of them had record-breaking years. And these companies have been in business. This isn't like a startup that just had explosive growth by accident. These are companies that one had been in business 18 years, the other had been in business 24 years. These are businesses that have been successful for a long time, never had a budget. We implement a budget despite the pandemic, despite the shutdown, they have record-breaking years. That's how powerful. That explains right there how powerful budget is. You can try, and again, most businesses don't have them. And I think it's what I gathered is a lot of times people, first of all, they don't want it, they feel like it's restrictive, and budget doesn't have to be restrictive. If you're growing, I use it. A lot of times I think people think of it analogous, the word budget is analogous to like the word diet, right? When I tell you, Joel, you got to go on a diet, what do you instantly think of? Oh, I got to drink water and eat salad, right?
Yeah, I got to think of what I got to give up.
Right. And it's not necessarily the case. When I was competing in powerlifting, when I was moving up weight classes, my diet, I had to consume a certain amount of calories every single day, every certain amount of hour, every 3 hours, I had to have this many calories, et cetera. I was growing, and your budget can be the same way. So a budget doesn't need to be restrictive. A budget is just giving you a plan that you can measure to every single month and know exactly what's working and, more importantly, what's not working, so you can fix it right away. So it doesn't, it doesn't linger, and you don't get to September and go, holy crap, I don't think we're going to hit our revenue goal. And you go, well, what can we do now? And you go, well, it's like turning a battleship. We don't have enough time to really make up the full difference for the whole year. Well, if you've got a budget, where the heck that is, where you're at with that right away, and you can fix things and figure out what's working and say, let's take that because it's working really well with this product, and let's apply it to this one that's not working well at. But what you said earlier, Joel, is exactly what I thought too, is economic downturn, tough situations create opportunities.
Right. Oh, tremendously. We've seen that with our mutual friend Jason All.
Mm-hmm.
As far as his thing that he's done for his him and his father with their company, they've pivoted. And I think a lot of businesses have pivoted too, and that's where the innovation, I think, that's where I know that's where the innovation starts to come, is because the mindset the willingness to flip that little switch to say, hey, listen, we're not stuck out. Let's figure out a new way to do this, because there's always a new way.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree 100%.
So, what would be another one? I guess looking back this last year, you could probably identify a number of key things that businesses that failed did this thing, but businesses that flourished did this thing.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I can see is what you mentioned earlier, Joel, is that, their mindset. When the tough times hit, did they go into the fetal position, or did they say, okay, what are we going to do? Let's roll up our sleeves. Because here's another thing that I saw that happen. We had 10 years of unprecedented economic growth, right? So we all got fat, dumb, and happy. You just assume that next year, sales are going to go up again, and sales are going to go up again, because that's what they've been doing for 10 years, right? And so we got lulled into a sense of complacency, a lot of business owners, in that, you didn't have to put forth a ton of effort. I don't want to say you didn't put forth effort, but you didn't have to work as hard because the economic growth was happening overall in the economy. So that was helping boost and put wind in your sails for sales.
Right.
So I think we got sort of fat, dumb, and happy with that type of mindset, and not thinking of, we were well overdue. I mean, the typical business cycle is about 5 years, right? To where you hit a peak and then you go down and you come back up. Well, we had 10 years of growth. So we were
just climbing. Yeah.
We were well overdue for this. Now, I didn't know it was going to come in the form of a pandemic, but, I started working with my clients, now it's been 18 months ago or so. I said, look, my expectation was an economic downturn was going to hit, and I wanted my clients to be prepared for July 1st of 2020. I said, I don't think it's going to hit that early, but I want to make sure we're prepared, because exactly what we were talking about, Joel, that's going to create opportunity.
Right.
Because not all of your competitors are going to be prepared. They're not going to have a fortress balance sheet. And so, unfortunately, what's going to happen is they're going to go under. They're not going to make it through. We are, and that's going to give us opportunity. They're going to have clients, customers that are not being served now because they've gone out of business, and we can serve them. We can help them and help grow our business. And that is exactly what happened. Now, the funny part is some of my clients, and same thing, Joel, I'm having that conversation with them. They're like, oh my gosh, you're being paranoid, Mr. Biz. Like, don't worry about it, because they had 10 years of growth. So they're thinking, oh, it's, this is going to go on forever. It's not going to go on forever. Of course, I didn't know it was going to be a pandemic, but we were headed towards a downturn one way or another, right? And I wasn't expecting, the same thing that happened in 08, 09. I was expecting much lesser of a downturn, but nonetheless, and that's what happened. We had fortress balance sheets. We were prepared. A couple of my clients there, well, my one client, his number one competitor, he's the number one in his market. The number two person, so his number one competitor, went out of business. So we took on all that business. So we grew like crazy. We were able to save jobs because now we had all this extra volume. Well, we need resources. So those people that were losing their jobs from that company, we were able to hire them, save those jobs. We were able to buy assets. So it's a service-based company. We need trucks on the road. Trucks on the road equals revenue. Well, we were able to buy their trucks at 40 cents on the dollar, right? So it created a huge, and so this year, I mean, we're already, we're about 2 months in, and we're killing it this year because we've got that slingshot effect of, being able to do that and do all those things in 2020. But, being prepared for those types of things are important, but, seizing those opportunities when things or a downturn occurs, because they're going to happen. I mean, again, I'm not being paranoid. It's just part of the business cycle.
Well, what would you say for a business? Let's say, because last year there's a lot of businesses, they had record growth. I know that we ourselves experienced like a 24% growth last year over the year previous, which I'm really excited about that on a pandemic year. Let's say a business did not see that growth. They realized they didn't prepare well. They're still afloat, they're still alive. What would be your next bit of advice for them?
what I would say is the obvious answer is they should have done this, what I'm about to say, a year ago, 14 months ago, but is you got to sit down and really have a brainstorming session with your leadership team, maybe your advisory council, whatever you might have, because you got to, again, I won't use the P word, Jason Alt's P word. I'll say it, adapt. You have to adapt.
Yeah.
Not pivot, but adapt. Because, it's a new world now, right? And depending on the type of business you have, the pandemic and all the changes that have occurred and how we do business now may have significantly impacted your business and what you need to do. And so to get going again and get a kickstart, you really need to sit down and rethink everything. I mean, just sit down and say, I'm starting from scratch. Like, let's just pretend we're building this business from ground zero and really start to think thoughtfully about it. And the important part of that conversation, and I know you know this, Joel, but you have to have at least one person in that room that has a strong voice and is a cynic. You have to have that person that goes, that's a crappy idea, right? You have to get that honest feedback, and not just, you don't want everyone who's just a yes sir, or yes man, or yes woman. You got to have those cynics in the room to say, that's exactly how we've been doing it, and it doesn't work,
Right. Now, let's separate also too, for those those people that might be listening. That cynic is, we're not referring to a habitually negative influence in an environment, right? But it's somebody that's saying, hey, looking at looking at the numbers, looking at the facts, this does not work. It hasn't worked for us in the past. And really the goal there is to start the thinking process again, to find a new idea.
Right. Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Right. So, because I think, because a lot of people will, like, I'm the cynic. I always think that stuff doesn't work. Well, that's usually somebody that habitually thinks nothing will work.
True. And
frankly, that individual should be out of the organization.
Absolutely.
Because they're gonna hold the organization back. So they need to create an emergency plan now, because it's not too late. If their doors are still open, they still have customers, they still have a product or service that they can offer, they need to take that brainstorming session to really collaborate and say, okay, how do we go forward? Because things aren't going back to what we thought was normal. That normal that's called history. And there's going to be a new normal that we're going to need to be able to grow into. That's why we started a business.
Yeah, and a big part of that is that exercise is really look at every product or service that you offer and look at the profitability of every one. Because what it may be is that you look at it and you say, you know what, we've got these two new ideas and we can have a profitability margin of, make it up, 20%. Right. And we've got current products that we're using resources on that have a margin of 10%. Well, let's stop doing those. And let's start doing these. Now we've just doubled our profitability, right? We got rid of a laggard, a 10% profitable product, and created two new products or services that are 20%. That's another exercise you can go through, because you might say, well, geez, we came up with these ideas, but how do I fund them? Well, that's one way to do it. Look at, when I was in the corporate world, we used to look at, even for performance reviews for employees, the idea was the people who are the bottom performers, you give them 6 months, right? You try to help them, and you come up with a performance improvement plan, a PIP as we call them, and you give them 6 months. And if it doesn't work, you get rid of them and you bring new people in, right? Same sort of thing with your profitability. Is you got to really take an honest look at those products and services. And sometimes you got to stop doing some products because you just can't offer them at, to the public at a price that's going to be acceptable to them. And you might be wasting resources on those things when you could be, pushing those resources toward more profitable endeavors.
And we've seen the same thing. We've seen the same thing with some of our products and services, and we've had to change price. It's because if we're going to provide that product or that service, we realize that it's going to require X amount of man hours or X amount of whatever. And where we are pricing it into the market so as to try to grab a market share actually wasn't doing us any good. It would have been better for us to go find that customer that would be willing to, for example, pay that product or service at a higher price, or just simply stop offering that.
Yep.
Altogether. It's a hard choice but it's a real choice you got to make. And I think a lot of business owners know it already. They just haven't come to terms with making that hard decision.
Yeah. And I'll give you just a real quick example of that, Joel. I worked with a jewelry store. They had a single location. They have 12 jewelry cases in their store.
Okay.
3 of the cases were a particular type of product that was not very profitable. And so I looked at that and said, we have 25% of our super valuable floor space that's being taken up by a product that's not very profitable,
Right.
where we only have 3, another 25% that's the most profitable. Like, why do we have that mix? I'm not saying we get rid of the 3 cases, but maybe we go down to 1 case for that less profitable product.
Mm-hmm.
And we, take those 2 cases we have now and put our more profitable items in there. Something simple like that, man, think about the difference that makes. The example I gave earlier, if you get rid of a 10% profitable product and replace it with a 20%, as I mentioned, when you sell that, you are making twice as much money without really doing anything different. So easy way to really increase the profitability in your business by doing things like that.
Do you think that for some businesses, they kind of get stuck on how they think the client will buy versus because they relate it to how they buy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, at some point or another, we're all guilty of that.
Yeah. Yeah. We that was something we were talking about in our morning meeting this morning is, just the mindset. We got to, there's a saying that I believe car dealers use a lot, or, frankly, any sales, don't sell out of your pocket, sell out of their pocket. And so sometimes we need to realize, like, what does the market actually want from you? Not what do you want to give the market? It's not always about what you're 100% passionate about. If you run a business, you're trying to run a business. You're trying to create opportunities and solve problems at the end of the day. So, well, let's you're a best-selling author too. As I'm going through our notes here, tell us about that a little bit. Tell us. I guess you have a book, Pathway to Profits. You want to tell us a little bit about what that book's about?
Yeah, so that book's got it's got 10 different subjects that are critically important for small business owners in making their business more profitable and more efficient. So things like, we've got a super long chapter on revenue growth. So we talk about some ideas. Some of the ideas you probably heard of, some of them you may not have heard of, but we break down, how do you grow revenue, right? There's really only 3 ways to grow revenue. So we break those 3 down. And so how do we grow each of those 3 in components? We break down some risk type things that you don't typically talk about, but are super important. It's one of those nerdy finance things, like no one wants to talk about risk or anything like that, but you don't know until it's in your lap, right? And so that book breaks down those 10 different topics, and I think I've gotten a ton of good feedback from it. Like I said, it was fortunate enough to be a #1 bestseller, and I don't even know how many we've sold now. It's been crazy, but yeah, I think, like I said, the feedback we've gotten it's super helpful, especially for someone, excuse me, who maybe is really good at, the widgets they make or the service they provide, excuse me, but they don't understand the business side of their business as well as maybe they should or could. And so maybe they're doing okay, but they could be doing a lot better. And I think that the Pathway to Profits book will help them sort of break through and create some new opportunities for them.
How can people find that book?
It's out on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then Amazon, and is it on your website as well? Right.
It's actually not on our website. I don't think we have it out there. Probably should.
All right. I see it on Amazon right now. So like if you have an unlimited Kindle, it looks like you can actually access that and start diving into this content right away. So, it's for a lot of businesses right now, I guess, again, going back to the earlier, a line of a topic that we were talking about, if they're still alive, it's not too late for them to churn things around.
No, absolutely. If you're still alive right now, excuse me, jeez, I got a frog in my throat. If you're still alive now, you've weathered the worst, at least I think you've weathered the worst of the storm. So congratulate yourself and roll up the sleeves and let's get going for the next phase. Right.
Because really the next phase, there's so much opportunity that's out there. You've probably seen, competitors, you've probably seen, similar businesses in your niche go away. And there's all that opportunity there that you have now an opportunity to grab, and grow your business in 2021. For me, and my angle of view is like 2021 has enormous possibilities. Just ginormous possibilities. So
yeah, for sure. But as you mentioned, the key part of that is the mindset.
Yeah.
You know, are you thinking survival or are you thinking thriving? I
Right.
mean, major difference there.
Right. And you know, I think, what do you think a lot of small businesses kind of think that that's really they're like, well, that's easy for you to say. What would you say to those businesses?
I would say it's not a choice. You have to do that. If you have to have that mindset. If you want to continue to grow and evolve your business, and provide more opportunities where, jobs, provide more opportunities for your customers, you have to always be thinking in that mindset.
Right.
That survival mode, I think, man, that's just not a long-term winning proposition, and not my mind, not that I've seen either.
Right. You're going back to just always scavenging. That's it.
Right.
In that essence, you're only looking at, and I mean, and that goes back to some of the things that you were talking about before. I think I see a lot of businesses, they get stuck. They're always scavenging because they do not want to let go of that low profitability product or
Yep.
service. They're like, everybody knows me for this. Everybody loves me for this. Yeah, but you ain't making it with this.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And a big part of that, Joel, is just, and it sounds so easy, but it's so true. Just listen to your customers.
Right.
They'll tell you. They're going to give you the feedback, but you have to be open and receptive, and sometimes ask them. With all my clients, we at least once a year, we do a survey with all of our existing client base. It's a touch point for us, right?
Right.
It shows that we care, and it gives us valuable feedback, and that provides opportunities. You see a consistent theme amongst the responses you get. You go, holy crap, we need to create a new service or product because look, we got this feedback and people are really wanting this. And so they'll give you the answers a lot of times. You just have to be, open to it and listen to it.
Right. Well, and I think, and I don't know, I see businesses sometimes just really afraid to ask the question, the hard question. They're like, if I ask that question, it'll scare them away. It's I was at a workshop and one of the really successful business owners there that was at that workshop, he owns a $50 million shipping company. And he was asked that point blank question of, hey, when you get asked the hard questions, do you have a lower respect for that person? Do you get annoyed? Or he goes, no, I actually respect that person more and I want to know more now.
Right.
So I think for a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, those that are starting business, you got to be willing to figure out what are those hard questions, not only to ask yourself, ask your team, ask your clients, because if you don't do that, what are you doing? You're trying to make a hobby a business at that, right. At that point. Yeah. So what would be the maybe a couple of big takeaways that businesses could implement today? Maybe opportunities, maybe it's programs. Any suggestions out there you have for businesses today?
Well, I'll start with my 3 pillars of financial success. So you have to make sure your cash flow is tight, right? Without cash, you don't have business, right? Obviously, super, super important. There are probably ways that you can improve your cash flow. Even if cash flow is not an issue for you, there's probably ways that you can free up some cash that have more opportunities to reinvest back in the business. And again, that's a lot of that stuff's in my first book, How to Be a Cash Flow Pro, as well as in Pathway to Profits. But cash flow. So this is where I start with every company. We start with cash flow, tighten that up. Then we go to the B word, budget. So that's one of those things. Like I said, most businesses don't have a budget, and I'll put it to you this way, Joel. If a potential client talks to me and they don't want to do a budget, that's a deal breaker for me. I won't work with you. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I just know that if you not willing to do a budget, then you're probably not being open-minded and you're shutting yourself out to a huge opportunity. So,
right.
And then the third one is pricing. And again, a lot of that is avoiding that silent business killer or finding it and then getting rid of it. So those 3 things are super important. And the one that I'll say that most businesses, as I mentioned, don't have and don't do is a budget. And man, I tell you, it's just so, so important, as I've mentioned before. But that's the one thing that I would say, the cash flow thing, some of those, if you don't know them, you got to find someone who does, right? And even on the pricing, if you don't know how to peel back the onion well enough, you got to hire someone to do that. A budget, you can figure out how to do that on your own. Anyone can do that. So that's the one I would say that everyone listening right now can go out and create a budget and start measuring themselves to that. So super, super important and something easily actionable that will make a massive difference in your business. I promise you.
Awesome. And a budget, like making that budget, that's as simple as like an Excel sheet, a Google sheet, plot out, hey, here's my rent. Here's my wage, here's my salaries and wages that we got to pay. Here's electricity. Here's this, here's this, here's this. Now you know a number. You know that if you only did, if your budget says you need $20,000 in cash flow just to cover the core, you need more than $20,000 to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the other thing that's powerful about it. And a lot of businesses are tracking sales, of course, but that's another way to look at it is you let's say your sales goal for the month is $200,000. And on the 15th, you look at your books and you're at 80,000. You're not halfway there. That gives you a kick in the pants of, holy crap, we're behind. So what are we going to do in the next 2 weeks to make up the difference, to get us to the 200 grand for this month? And instead of waiting until the numbers are final at the end of the month and going, oh crap, we only hit 160. We were 40,000 short. Well, it's too late now. Can't do anything about it.
Right.
It gives you that ability to, track things almost kind of real time to see where you're at. And on the same thing on the expense side of, if an opportunity presents itself and someone says, hey, we had an opening and do you want to sponsor this event? You can look at your expenses and say, you know what, I'd really like to, but I don't have the wiggle room this month. Revenues are down and I'm already up against the wall with my other expenses. Or our revenue's up. We have some wiggle room here. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. Instead of making the decision sort of blindly and then maybe regretting it that you didn't do it and it would have been a great opportunity, or regretting it that you spent the money and you probably shouldn't have.
Right. Makes sense. It's real simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
real simple. How can people follow you? How can people learn more about how to work with you, how to follow you?
Yeah, honestly, just if you Google Mr. Biz, you'll find me. YouTube channel, I'm on most of the social media platforms. So yeah, just if you Google Mr. Biz, you'll find me.
I think we have your website here. So is Mr. Biz Solutions right there?
Yep.
There we go. So if people are wanting to work with Ken here, with Mr. Biz himself, if anything, get content, get value, this would be the place to go. I mean, if you own a business right now, you're planning on starting a business, you owe it to yourself to get connected with Ken, follow his content. It's going to help you have the information you need. And that's kind of what it starts with, is getting the right information so that people can start a business and keep that business growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I see here, you've been featured on Fast Company, Business News Daily, Forbes, American Express, Yahoo, and New York Finance. You want to tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, it's crazy. My social media person, after a ton of these different things had come out, she's like, we need to literally have like a media page. Like, we have so much stuff. And so she worked with our website guy and we have a media page. But yeah, those are just some of the highlights or whatever. There's been a ton of them. It's been crazy. And really the difference for me, Joel, was all that stuff, those doors started to open was when I started doing videos. Back in 2018, 19, beginning of 19, I think, I committed to do, it was 2019, I guess. I committed to do 100 live streams in 5 months. I'm going to do 20 a month. And I sat down with an Excel spreadsheet, made out 100 topics, and just went live 20 times a month for 5 months straight and did 100 videos that were all like, 4 to 6 minutes long, easily digestible, put them out on the YouTube channel and all that good stuff. But that changed everything. I mean, that really, everything started to pick up. I think the big thing is it got a lot of people past the know, like, and trust phase, right? So they see me on video and they make the decision, right? This guy's a goofball and I think he's crazy, or, oh my gosh, I think he can help me, right? So
right. Well, and so I think that's about the time when I heard about you originally, was about 2018. Now that I think about it, so that's when I started following some of your stuff, and also got introduced to you via another mutual friend, Ken Walls.
Yep.
And so I mean, there you go. You just gave marketing advice too for all the businesses. Not only that they should make a budget, they need to adapt, they need to look at their cash flow. But hey, the simple way to really pop out of this in 2021, if you're not doing it already, make a video a day.
Yeah.
So,
to it. And progress, not perfection. So many people are afraid of video and they say, oh my gosh, I'm going to sound stupid or it's going to look bad, or people like authenticity. I did one video that got some of the most engagement of any video that I've done. And I've done, I don't know, over 200 now, probably 250.
right.
It was a day that I had to do a video. I was home. I'd gotten home and I was like, crap, I forgot to do a video. So I went out on our deck off our house, and it's kind of windy. So I was like, well, crap, I'm going to get my lav mic, right? So I got my lav mic and I put it on my tie and I start doing the video, and I'm just doing it on my phone. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of windy out here. I hope you guys can hear me. But, Mr. Biz is always prepared. He's got his lav mic. And as I picked it up to kind of show off, like, oh, man, I was so prepared. Look at me. I picked it up and the cord was dangling. I never plugged it into my phone. So I was like, oh, yeah, Mr. Biz, he's so smart. Look at this. I didn't even plug the dang thing into my phone. Like, what a doofus, But people love that. They like the authenticity of, like, it's just real. It's you being real. And the way I look at that, some people, a couple of my friends were like, oh my gosh, you got to take that video down. Why would you want someone to think that, you made a mistake or whatever? I'm like, that's me. If that, that's just being me being me. And if you're not cool with that, then you're probably not someone I would want to do business with anyway. Right.
Right.
You're not part of my people.
Right. No, and you're actually nailing something spot on the head there too. It's like some of the best content I've seen out there would be the quickest put together stuff. I got a Facebook ad that I think is probably doing the best out of so many. I've had a couple where it was one of those things where you just put it together. You said, let's go, let's roll with this. Let's not polish it. Let's just put it out there. And it's amazing because people want to see that information, that content, that connect with it. Sure, you can make the more professional stuff, but I love it, man. I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think even myself, I can say sometimes those things, it almost looks overproduced.
Yeah,
it looks very scripted. It's not, so like when I did those 100 videos, I would get a sticky note. Like that day's topic would be improving your cash flow with via invoicing. Right? How can you improve your cash flow by your invoice?
Right.
And so I would put down like 3 bullet points I wanted to cover in order, and I would stick it to the phone and I would just go live just to make sure I hit those 3 points and didn't forget them.
Right.
And it was completely unscripted. It was just me off the cuff, basically making sure I hit talk about those 3 bullet points during the 4 to 6 minutes, and just kind of doing that. Now I think a lot of people are afraid to do that type of thing, and right. I think I've got a little bit of an advantage because I've been doing my radio show for 4.5 years or whatever now. So that helps, of course, but still, I mean, everyone can do it. And I've even had a client, Joel, that was, excuse me, he had an HVAC company, and he's like, what do I do videos on? I don't do videos on cash flow. I'm like, well, here's how to figure out what videos to do. What are the top 10 reasons that people call you?
Right.
Top 10 problems they have, right? Oh, my pilot light went out. If you're a plumber, let's say. So I'm sure you get that question all the time. Oh, absolutely. Do a YouTube video on how to light your pilot light. Put it on your website.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh, I could do that. He said, don't most people do that? I go, no, most people don't. That's why they call you, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to you because that's what you do for a living. But to the average person, that their pilot light goes out, 3 times in their lifetime, they got to look it up every time. How the heck do I light this thing so I don't blow my house up, right? So things like that. Yeah.
That's what they're worried about. And maybe they don't want to do it themselves. Even after watching the video, they're going to call you.
Right.
Yeah. They're going like, this guy knows what he's doing. I trust him. He put a video out. It's on the internet. And actually that's what's an interesting, statistically wise, we trust, even though we know that not everything on the internet is true, we will trust the internet before we trust friends and family.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think you're right most of the time.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So, I mean, when you put that content out there on the internet, especially your social channels, people are getting to see the real you. They're getting to see those things. And Ken, if you're not following Ken, make sure you go follow him. He's on you just go to Mr. Biz Solutions, MrBizSolutions.com. He's got all his social links up there. Make sure you follow him because, he may not be able to tell you how to light your pilot light, but he can definitely tell you how to write your business in these times right now, and how to start a business right in these times right now. So is there any size of business you work with, Ken?
It varies, honestly. It's anywhere from startup all the way up to, we've got companies doing 20+ million a year in revenue. And so it's just different, right? So I've got my one-on-one stuff where I work directly with the business owner. I've got my continuity program, which is what Mr. Biz Solutions is, which is for typically like smaller businesses, and it's much more affordable. But you still get tons of access and live size companies.
Right. Awesome. Fantastic. And just looking through your website, you have programs available for really any business. So fantastic. Ken, I appreciate you joining us today. I appreciate the information that you're sharing, because I think business owners need to hear this. They need to know that, hey, number one, even if you went down and out last year, even if your business, let's face it, you're probably going to start another business. And this information hopefully is going to be helpful for you to look for different ways of what to look for to do it right. Any parting advice that you want to give the audience?
Keep your head down. Take action. Take action. I give him on social media, I give a Mr. Biz tip of the week every week. And that's our tip this week is you got to take action. You don't sit on the sidelines. Don't worry about being perfect. You got to take action. And to try to make it memorable and funny, I say in the tip, there are plenty of flat squirrels in the road that could make a decision. Make a decision, commit to it, and make it happen.
I like that. Don't be the flat squirrel.
Right. Exactly.
we missed the flat squirrel, but still don't be that one. So, yes. All right. Mr. Biz, Ken, thank you for jumping on today. We appreciate it. For all of you tuning in, be sure to tune in next week for another great episode of Be Growth Driven. We're here to give you the tips, the advice, the ways to help you grow your business, bringing on leaders like Mr. Biz here to help you get that advice from all different industries, from all different walks. So we appreciate you very much, Ken. I appreciate you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll catch you all next week.